The following video is part of Glyphwick's Recharge 2020 Skills Training Sessions. The focus of this video will be on foraging for golden chanterelles, a choice wild edible mushroom that is commonly found throughout the ceded territory. Golden chanterelles are highly sought after because they are relatively easy to identify, are difficult to confuse with other mushroom species, and often grow in abundance after mid to late summer rain showers in northern Wisconsin. In this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about the type of habitat you can find golden chanterelles. I'll touch on one lookalike species and some of the differentiating characteristics, and I'll show a few slides from processing and preparing mushrooms for long-term storage in the freezer so they can be enjoyed year-round. First of all, as a disclaimer, I just want to say that although mushroom foraging is a fun activity and eating wild mushrooms can be a really enjoyable experience, I highly recommend anyone who wishes to start foraging for and eating wild mushrooms to go out with someone who's experienced in the practice, to learn as much as you can through mushroom field guides and available literature before going out on your own. There are many species of mushrooms growing in our forests. Some are beautiful, some are delicious, and yes, some can be deadly poisonous. Although mushrooms often get a bad rap, focusing on the most easy to identify mushrooms such as golden chanterelles and morel mushrooms is a good way to start. That being said, every time I find wild mushrooms, I make sure I'm confident that I have properly identified the species, and I always test just a very small amount before eating any large portions of them. This is a location in the Bayfield County Forest. The composition of this upland forest is a mix of mature white and red pines with some balsam fir, aspen, paper birch, and some maples and oaks. And here's an example of a golden chanterelle you might find in this type of forest. The color ranges from light yellow to orange yellow on the cap and stem. The false gills fork as they run toward the edge of the cap and extend slightly down the stem. Here's another area within the same type of forest. As you can see from the video of these older, somewhat dried up golden chanterelles, the stems are smooth, they have no ring around the stem, and there's no bulb at the base of the stem when you pick them. Also, these golden chanterelles are growing out of soil, directly out of soil, whereas some of the lookalikes will grow out of woody debris on the soil. Another thing to keep in mind is that golden chanterelles do not have a hollow stem. This is really important to remember when you encounter one of the lookalikes. So we'll look at one of the similar species with a hollow stem later in the video. Freshly picked golden chanterelles can have a distinctive apricot aroma. If you break open the cap to look at the flesh will be almost white in color. So these examples are showing some of the golden chanterelles that have been fruiting for quite a while. There's evidence that insects have laid eggs on these mushrooms, and I would not harvest these for consumption. Had I found this location a week or so earlier, it probably would have been the most prime time to harvest them. Here is some video of a golden chanterelle lookalike. Some novice mushroom foragers might easily mistake this for an edible golden chanterelle. However, these are growing out of an old birch log on the ground. Golden chanterelles only grow directly out of the soil. As you can see, the color of these is a little more brownish yellow, and the texture is more rubbery. The false gills still split as they reach the edge of the cap, but they go all the way to the very edge of the cap, whereas the false gills in the golden chanterelles don't quite reach the very edge. Also, there is a grayish color to these gills, and these ones have a hollow stem. Golden chanterelles do not have a hollow stem like these mushrooms do. The final thing I want to touch on is what to do with your bounty of freshly picked golden chanterelles once you return from the forest. Many choose to just pick a small amount to have a small portion in a meal or two. For the most part, that's how I approach mushroom foraging as well. However, if you decide that you would like to pick a lot of them and preserve them for future use, there are several options, whether it's drying them, pickling them, or freezing them. There are several ways to do each of these preservation methods. This past summer, I found an area where the chanterelles were growing across several acres of upland forest. They were everywhere I looked, and they were in prime condition for harvesting. So I brought them home, I cleaned them off by using a small brush and some water, And then I pre-cook them and vacuum seal the packages for the freezer. Mushrooms hold a lot of moisture, so I like to get my biggest pan to medium to high heat and then cut the mushrooms into halves or quarters and put them in the hot, dry pan. This will draw out the moisture, but also the flavor. Eventually the water evaporates and the mushrooms reabsorb some of the liquid with the flavor. Then I add a little garlic and butter and simmer them for a few more minutes. I set those aside to cool and start another batch. Once cool, I package them up with a vacuum sealer, label them, and put them in the freezer. They'll last up to a year in the freezer. Well, if you made it this far through the video, miigwech. And I hope you were able to find this to be informative. Be aware, educate yourself, work with experienced mushroom foragers, and most of all, have fun learning.